Now let's get informed assessments, making sense of what's been discussed so far on this program. And for this, we have our guest commentators, two leading thinkers who will bring their depth and breadth of analysis to the big issues of the day. And they are the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, and the legislative consultant and public policy analyst, Okereke. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Let me come to you, Prof. It looks like the enmity between Senator Ali Ndume on the one hand and President Tinubu and the APC on the other is sort of that intense hostility is back with a vengeance. I mean, that's one way of looking at it, but your assessment of the things he said, are they fairly explosive?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's about enmity, really. I mean, he made some very salient points, and it's somewhat difficult to actually fault him. He was talking about imbalances in appointments, some kind of loop-sidedness, and we have always made the point that in an ethnically polarized country like ours, there's a need, for leaders to be de-ethnicized in their appointments. Let's have some fairness, what looks like balancing, because people are largely sensitive, to names. It's not about competence, it's not about merit, even though it should be a case of merit and competence. And if you're looking at it in that direction, there's no part of this country that you turn to that you not find merit and competence. But of course, in a country like ours, you should strike a balance between merit, and of course, some political consideration, so that there could be a sense of inclusion rather than sections of the country feeling marginalized, feeling excluded, from appointments as the case could be. And oftentimes, yes, we have had people making references to what has happened in our recent history, maybe in the period of Jonathan, where there's some alleged kind of lopsidedness in the period of President Buhari. There was allegations of ethnocentrism, and of course nepotism. Yes, even though we had it in the past somewhat, it's not an excuse for a succeeding government not to do things better. Of course, the Obasanjo template is there for us to make examples from. Obasanjo was largely balanced. Some of his closest aides were people that were from the other parts of the country other than his own part.
Even the military governments were quite balanced.
So we need that kind of balancing, especially where we're in a multi-ethnic country, a country like ours, where people are easily inclined to reading meanings, interpreting appointments alongside representation in terms of, to what extent am I included in these metrics? So we need that kind of projection, and it's actually very difficult to fault Senator Ndume in that regard. And I often imagine that leaders, political leaders, should not give oxygen to their critics. But when things are not rightly done, you are providing oxygen for your critics. And of course, we will have expected that a president, Bola Tinubu, for instance, who I have regarded as a postmodern leader, will not be caught in this round. But it does appear as if we are catching him there again, in this kind of round. But again, we expect that 2 years, he still has 2 clear years, to correct, to redirect his path, into an area where we'll see some kind of balancing, except it provides some justification for all. But I doubt the kind of justification that you can provide. Right. Is it merit? You find it everywhere else. What's the justification?
Well, let me come to you, Chibuzo Okereke. I mean, Senator Ndume was saying that the infraction of the federal character provisions in the Constitution is undermining trust in the government, in the APC party, which he belongs to. I wonder if that's what you have found, and whether or not you agree with him that this country needs to have that very effective balance if it's going to function properly and give a sense of inclusion to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have always had the challenge of effectively implementing the Federal Character provisions, whether in the Federal Character Commission Act itself or essentially the provisions of the Constitution in Section 14, even Section 16, that prescribed economic objectives of the country. In fact, Section 13 of the Constitution mandates every single Nigerian public officer exercising executive, legislative, and judicial powers to focus on the objective principles of state policy, which essentially said things must be balance, right? So, but when elections have consequences, and that's what I tell people, right? So when we do elections, we should take it very seriously, because when the character of leaders are not going to change because we decided to elect them, whether on equity or equality or even merit. It is essentially how institutions have been designed to effectively checkmate our political leaders. So as a senator of the Federal Republic, good enough you're raising your voices through the media, but it's not enough. You cannot complain like every other citizen of Nigeria. You've got the constitutional power to do something,
make a difference.
in the Senate. You've got to bring either motion,
although he can't do it by himself,
or bring, but you have to try, right? This issue of borrowing, for instance, look, the section 11, 12, 13, 14, almost to 17.
I want to come to that borrowing thing in a minute.
But in terms of this federal character issue, I think that the Senate has a responsibility to say, based on the fact before us, the president has committed a level of infraction.
I think you have a point.
And we call him
but that raises questions about the independence of the Senate, which has come up repeatedly.
Somebody, you see, I tell people that you have to apply the rules and the Constitution. If you don't raise a motion to that effect and watch the Senate debate it, and so people can even see the legislators are then interested in the fact that this president is making appointments in a manner that is further promoting divisiveness in the country.
Right.
And then when we fight, for instance, if you go to the Southwest, they'll tell you that the president is appointing Lagosians, not even Yoruba.
Well, actually, I wanted to point that out because somebody made this point that you're making. I wanted to bring that up with you, Prof. Whether you see this, because I mean, you largely agreed with Senator Ndume that the appointments appeared to be skewed and were not sort of reflecting that federal character. I wonder whether you think that the president, those appointments, he's trying to promote ethnic solidarity and appointing as many of his kinsmen as possible, or whether, just picking up from what Chibuzo Okereke said there, he sees Nigeria as the bigger, sort of bigger part of the microcosm that was Lagos that he ran. And he's simply saying, look, I did Lagos efficiently because I had people who I could trust and worked with me, and I'm going to try and replicate that on a national level.
I think he's more inclined, to rewarding loyalty. He's more compensatory in his approach. Continuing from a mindset of hiring people that he imagines that he can trust. That's what I think he is doing. I don't think he has this mindset to say that it has to be exclusively Yorubas or people from the South.
Because a lot of people are arguing that it's not actually spread across Europe.
Yeah, that's it. So he has...
he made that point.
I think he's just committed to rewarding loyalists who are maybe not necessarily incompetent. Yes, many of them are competent, but it goes beyond competence. In an ethnically,
Trump.
Yeah, we're not the United States of America that is slightly sophisticated in terms of classification, in terms of dividers. We are not that sophisticated. That's why we need to be sensitive with this appointment. Remember also, there were a country where a lot depends on government. There's a heavy reliance on government, not just in terms of economic policies, but in terms of political, what do you call it now, political patronage. And of course, people, anytime you see appointment, the first thing people look at is, what's the name? Where's the name coming from? Is he Hausa? Is he Igbo? Is he Yoruba? That's the first thing before merit is actually secondary. And you just want to expect that our leaders will be sensitive to this. And that's why I keep saying that we need some level of explanation, I'm not sure we have seen any official explanation justifying this appointment. They might have their reasons, or the president, for instance, might have.
But I think you're right. There needs to be some explanation.
Yeah,
I agree. Let me come to you, Chibuzo, because you raised the issue of debt and borrowing. I mean, you're a legislative consultant. You know about the legislature than most of us. Have you been surprised by the scale of borrowing and by the fact that, as Senator Ndume suggested, there was no national approval of that borrowing.
Well, I don't think the distinguished senator is entirely correct. You remember the popular, you were there. No, I wasn't there. When
you mean he might have buggered off to somewhere while the vote is taking place?
You know, that was even in the Ninth Assembly, when the Ways and Means, was approved by the National Assembly. So the issue came up that since the securitization, there have been interest charge of about 6 trillion. And then there was a need for an ad hoc committee of the Senate to actually investigate how the CBN was able to advance that level of borrowings to the federal government. And that ad hoc committee, up to today, we haven't seen their report. And that was when the Senate President asked Senator Ndume, but you were there in the Ninth Assembly when the approval was made. But the point is, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, you see, if we fix the National Assembly, if we can support them, if we can get the institution to run the way it has been designed, if we can obey our laws and implement our laws strictly, we are going to have results. If you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Section 11, 12, 13 down, prescribes this medium-term expenditure framework. In fact, the preparation of it goes with consultation with National Assembly. And it should get to the National Assembly 4 months before the start of the new fiscal year.
Okay.
The National Assembly is expected to approve that. And these things have the macroeconomic objective plans of the government, the borrowing plans of the government, the fiscal strategy paper of the government. But it's not being taken seriously. Now, if most times these borrowing arrangements are laid in the medium-term expenditure framework. Now, what he is saying is that despite that approval, he expects that each of the effective borrowing should now be transmitted. And indeed, any borrowing the government ought to do under the law should go to the National Assembly with the details of the borrowing plan, including...
And it doesn't sound like they're doing it.
The statutory charges. And that is why you are the senator. I can't go there and raise a motion that there has been an infraction of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Constitution, and water. So beyond the media, I want to see him stand on the floor of the Senate,
I think
raise substantive motion
legitimate
for this
point,
to be investigated.
I don't mean to cut into you there, but I mean, I need to move this on fairly quickly because we've literally got 3 minutes left. So if you could keep the answers fairly short. I want to turn to the Labour Party. Julius Abure saying earlier today that he unquestionably remains the national chairman of the Labour Party and accusing the chairperson of the Caretaker Committee, Nanadi Usman, of illegality in claiming victory at the Supreme Court. I mean, it looks like the Labour Party is on an irreversible path to self-destruction.
And it's actually very unfortunate, especially when it appears as if there's a problem with interpreting the judgment of the highest court in the land. And oftentimes I've always said, if political parties can resolve their disputes outside the court, the better for them, because by the time they go to court, there's a lot more deep, we're going to be witnessing deep-seated animosity, an irreconcilable, outcome, as the case could be, and that's what we'll see panning out. But I'm also looking at the bigger picture. They are probably trying
We've got 10 seconds.
Yeah, they're probably trying to jeopardize the chances or the prospects, of their star aspirants that we had the last time. And of course, this is not necessarily good for them as the case
indeed.
Could be.
And a quick final word for you. Do you think the Labour Party can salvage itself before everything falls apart?
Mr. Charles, as a student of government, if we were taught that the legislature makes the law, executive implements it, and judiciary interprets. Today in Nigeria, when the judiciary interprets, you still need strict interpretation to understand what they are saying. But I can tell you by the decision of the Supreme Court, the Abure-led leadership of Labour Party have been effectively buried. I think he's just wasting time, making sure that the Labour Party doesn't have a chance to reinvent themselves and be able to fight for victory in the next election. And we shouldn't have him do that, owing to the level of success achieved previously. We need viral opposition parties for the country democracy to make progress.
On that note, Chibuzo Okereke, the legislative consultant and public policy analyst, and Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who is a current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University, Abuja. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, before we go, very quickly, breaking news coming from the United States. Donald Trump has said there is no going back on tariffs. And that suggests, as a lot of economists are predicting, that the world is going to lurch towards a global recession. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.